Right.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
thank
now you have to say whether you want
Now
to.
you have to submit to being recorded, right?
I
Exactly.
submit.
I submit.
Well,
I
'cause
submit.
they got in trouble for recording chats and things like that. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'm Kirista Trask. As Leah said, I'm actually in Astoria. I spent 10 years in Portland. I lived in St. John's, which is the neighborhood close to Leah and Edith, and started working with Portland Open Studios then. When I moved to Astoria, COVID had just hit, and there was really no reason for me not to be working with Portland Open Studios since everything was done virtually anyway. And here we are, in a lifelong relationship. I have been painting for 10 years, a little over 10 years actually. I went to art school for sculpture, but when I got out of school, I realized that I didn't have the money or the capacity to set up a sculpture studio, and that I was gonna have to pick up a different creative practice. So I am a self-taught abstract painter. Today's lesson is probably going to be one of the lessons where I talk the most, mainly because I'm a mixed media abstract painter. I really like to go through and introduce people to a variety of options when creating abstract art. What's nice about abstract art is that anybody can be using any medium, and it is applicable. I think that one of the things that's always important to start an abstract art class out, though, is one of my favorite definitions of abstract art, mainly because people often don't know what it is. When people ask me what I do, and I say, well, I do abstract art, and they say, what is that? You know, a loose definition of art is the application or expression of human creative skill and imagination. Well, abstract art uses a visual language of shape, form, color, and line to create a composition which may exist with a degree of independence from visual references in the world. I think it's always important that may exist within a degree of independence from visual representation, because some abstract artists really like to put representational pieces in their abstract work. It doesn't make it less abstract. It's just that we're not going to be falling into the same rules that you guys might have been learning in Leah's classes, or some of her other teaching classes. Unfortunately, abstract art can be really hard. It can be frustrating. It's also really beautiful and really exciting. And sometimes your biggest oops is your best thing that you've ever done. And all of a sudden you're like, how am I ever going to recreate that ever again? It's the most beautiful thing I've ever created. Hopefully, you know, in this class, we'll have some of those experiences together. This class, we're going to cover materials. I use a wide range of materials. I always encourage people to ask questions. Feel free, you can ask in the chat, or you can ask me, you know, through the video. I don't have a problem with people interrupting with questions, especially when it comes to a certain medium that I'm using. I also did put a link in the chat, and that link is a Amazon list. I do not want you to buy off of Amazon. I do want to preface that. I do support local art supply companies, but people often want to know the exact brands that I use. And so this gives you the opportunity to at least see the brands that I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using a lot of things, lots of different things in my examples today. So, you know, hopefully that list helps keep it somewhat cohesive, and you have a better frame of reference if it's something that you find yourself interested in exploring a little bit more. The first 4 classes in this series are going to be abstract basics. It can be really exhausting to try and learn all of basics of abstract art in one. And yes, Marcel, in this chat, it should be this link up here. You guys should be able to link to the list there and at least see the brands that I'm using.
I'm going to send it across the WhatsApp thread right now too.
Perfect.
So it'll be both.
So today we're gonna talk about materials. I do have some exercises that we're gonna go over and some ways that you guys can start to collect your own visual language for your abstract work. And then next week we're gonna talk about design basics. A lot of people have this idea that abstract art is just kind of random, and it's not. It actually, there's a lot of really important design basics that make abstract art good. So next week we'll spend quite a bit of time going through some of the basics and working on exercises that will help us develop those basics. And then June 15th, we're going to talk about color theory. I'm not going to do a lot of color mixing because I do shamelessly and with no qualm use colors right out of the tube. But we're going to talk about the psychology of color and how color relates to each other, how we can start to build our own language with our own colors that are different than other people's colors. And then June 22nd, we're going to bring it all together. We're going to start developing a visual language. July's classes will start to look at different types of abstract art. So every week we'll come together, we'll look at a different artist's work, and we'll have some creative exercises that are based off these types of work. Abstract art is very young. It's a very young, art form. It has only been around for a short period of time. However, it is wildly vast. And so there's going to be lots of fun things for us to do. Does anybody have any questions before I get started? Okay. So I work on paper. This is 140-pound paper. I do 140-pound paper minimum. Watercolor, mixed media, printing, even some great printing papers that come in a heavier body are great. I think it's really important that you spend the money on your paper because you're going to be abusing it. Since we use so much water in abstract work, it needs to be able to take a beating. I have, some thicker watercolor paper that I do a lot of my sketching on. And then I always use sketchbooks. I'm a huge sketchbook person. And like I said, I make sure that the sketchbooks have paper that is thick enough to actually handle what we might actually put it through. This is Handbook. Handbook has a lot of sketchbooks that come in a variety of shapes and sizes. I like the square. I like the square in general. And sometimes I will even make my own sketchbooks so that I can control what the paper is, and I can put more of a variety of paper in here. They're coming out with a lot more mixed media papers that come in tones. And so I've been starting to experiment with some of that. You can see some of the issues with this is like things stick together, and it is part of what it is, right? So, it's important that you take the time to get the right kind of paper. What I will say is, if you have a lighter paper and you have a stack of it, because I'm the queen of reusing materials, I always prep my paper with clear gesso. I use a Liquitex clear gesso. I can tell you I've tried every clear gesso possible. Liquitex is by far the best. What does gesso do? Well, it seals all of the fibers in your paper together so that your paint sits on top a little bit better. Another thing that it does, which is really important for me as an artist, is it creates a tooth. So then the paper feels a little bit like sandpaper. Both this piece and my other piece over here have been prepped with gesso today. Unlike a white gesso on canvas, you don't have to let it sit for 24 hours. It takes less than, half an hour to dry, or like it's really hot in Astoria today, so it took probably 10 minutes to dry. So hold on, I made a list and then I walked away from it. Oh, yes. See, this is why I made a list. Another type of paper that I use is bristle paper. What I'm going to say about it though, not all mediums do as well on it. It's a great illustration paper. It's really more for pens. If you end up finding that you're the kind of person who really likes paint pens, or you find that you like to use a lot of microns in your abstract work, it's a great option. I definitely still clear gesso it, which means that I want it to have some tooth. I don't want it to feel smooth. I want to feel when my paintbrush goes over top of it. And I use a lot of scraping materials, and so that's a really important thing. After my paper, the second most important part of my process is that I use a lot of water in a squirt bottle, right? However, I use a wetting agent. So then it's half water, half wetting agent. This is in that list as well. It's a Golden brand wetting agent. Really what this is supposed to do is reduce the surface tension of water so that it doesn't disrupt your pigments, so that they don't spread apart. For me, it's just, it's about archival integrity. I've been doing this a long time, and when I sell a painting, I want somebody to feel like it's going to look that color as long as it's possible, and wetting agent helps it do that. I think that it was a gift given to me by another artist that has been a life changer for me. So paper, wetting agent is very important. So now we're going to move on to my favorite subject of all things, which is water-soluble graphite. So I usually start my first layer with water-soluble graphite. I have a variety of options and I'm going to show you how they work. And then I use a powdered charcoal. Okay. Really what this boils down to is I'm going to modify all of these with water. Everything I use today and I show you today is going to be water soluble, meaning that we can be modified by water. I do have tips on maybe the layers that you're going to put things in, because you don't want to put watercolor as one of your base layers. Every layer of water on top of watercolor is going to distort the watercolor and break it up. If you're going to use watercolor, you want to use your watercolor as a top layer on top of your other paints that won't be modified every time you add water. So we're going to talk about some of those things. But my base layer is usually, you know, like this weird charcoal powder that I like to do that with. And it's really inconsistent and it's really scary to use at first. So please do not be afraid of it. One of my favorite artists, Jean Oliver, really showed me how to use it best. You can add water at this point. You can spray it with hairspray, which instead of a fixative, I use a hairspray on my lower layers. Or really, I like to, I have water on this type of brush that I have here, which is a new brush I've just started working with. It's a little more.
Is that like a Sumi brush? What is it?
It's like a large size toothbrush. It was a what I call a dots and doodles special. It's a dots and doodles special, meaning that I randomly found it at Dots and Doodles, but it looks like a large oversized Sumi brush. It's got a better handle, you know, like Sumi handles tend to come off. But what it really does is on my really large pieces gives me a little, oh, it's that one right there, that dark and gross one. Sorry, getting some help from the studio mates. So the water will break down the graphite. It creates kind of a nice little thing. If you want to keep your splatters, which a lot of artists really like to keep like this section, which you guys can barely see, but there's a bunch of little tiny dots. You can use a hairspray as your next layer and it will like actually fix it down. And then you're able to work on top of it.
Do you ever use alcohol?
I did. I went through a phase where I did like alcohol inks and that kind of thing. But really what it boiled down to for me was that I didn't really know how that was disrupting other layers of my meat. I you know, as I do this longer and my work is selling for larger price points and it's turning into things that people are, you know, that are really important to families and heirlooms and things like that. I want to make sure that it is in the best shape possible. So I just got worried about it. I didn't want it to deteriorate my paper and things like that, but I do love it. Sorry, I won't be talking about any kind of alcohol-based inks today. Maybe in the future though. So I usually will let the first layer go down like this and then I'll let it dry. We'll let everything dry. That's why we have so many different spots here. A second version, because I have lots of graphite that I like to use. This is a pan graphite. It's art graph. And it's another thing I'm addicted to ridiculously. It's a little lighter. It's like a gray color. I like to use it with a paintbrush. I like to add water. It's water soluble. So, you know, you can, the whole point is to use water, I think, with this pan, because I don't know how else you would use it. And then I use it as a base layer, and I will often really wash it out a little bit, just as this like small muted, kind of get rid of the white. For a lot of people, when they're starting this kind of work, they're really afraid of like white paper. I think that we can, using different materials, we can kind of help trick our brain into feeling like we're not just starting something huge and important when it's not. So this is great, the pan. My pan has been replaced, however, with a very special type of water soluble sticks. You see this? I feel like a kid who's using a crayon. This is a Prima, which is a brand that's really just like a scrapbooking brand that started doing these, but they go up to a 12B. You know, I didn't really think that with graphite that the color, that the weight of the graphite really mattered so much until I got a 12B graphite stick. And then I found that it really does. Two ways to use it. I like to dip mine in water. Again, the water thing. And then, you know, it creates almost like it's often used instead of black for me. It's like a base layer. It's very gestural. You can roll it. You can hold it down at the end so it's a little looser and really, you know, have some looseness with it, which is a great like first layer and trying to figure out what your composition might be. Or you can use it dry. And then it's like a pencil. The only thing is, it's extremely, when I say extremely, I mean extremely water soluble. Any bit of water is going to modify what it looks like, which is great. It's great for experimentation. But if you're doing controlled marks, this is not the kind of graphite you want to do controlled marks with. So those are the 3 water soluble graphite that I use. And like I'll show you I tend to scrape on top of the marks to move the water through it. At this point, you know, I have some personal aversions to dirty abstracts. I don't know why. This is a thing that I'm working through. You know, a lot of people really like the really dirty abstracts. They really like to have something that's dark. So another trick that has been taught to me by an artist friend is that you can use white gesso. And I usually have a white gesso and a tiny, like the tiniest little paint thing ever. Like I don't need my half-gallon white gesso sitting up on my desk while I'm trying to work. So
I've never seen a little jar of white gesso like that. It's
I
adorable.
bought the jar and put gesso in it. So
Oh,
that,
there you go.
I'm a plein air abstract painter, and so I paint outside a lot. And so I need my tools to be able to be fully transportable. And I can't take a ton of stuff with me often, right? As one of the reasons I live at the beaches is that I really do relate to the outdoors a lot. But the white gesso is really good with the graphite in particular. It creates a shiny gray material that you can't get with any kind of paint. This is, again, base layers when you're trying to, you know, you're just getting started, you're going to cover up most of it, right? We're not going to get too concerned about base layers at this point in the classes because we're going to cover them up with a lot of other layers. But I think that, you know, with the darkness that the water soluble graphite can be, the white gesso is like a fun way of kind of just toning it down, creating some value within the painting, which is helpful when you're later trying to figure out what your composition is going to look like. So I always have a little, ironically, I don't actually prep any canvases with white gesso. I only use it with my graphite specifically, you know, at this point in the process. Does anybody have any questions about the graphite at this point? This seems to be always the question people tend to be confused about the most. Okay, so we will go on because we have quite a list today. Another thing that I use a lot that I want to talk about as well is watercolor pencils. I have brand feelings about watercolor pencils. Other people will have other feelings. Again, this is another, that brand that did my water soluble graphite does watercolor pencils that are really good. And they do water soluble oil pastels, which in nature,
Really?
it shouldn't work, right? I'm going to show you both of them. Yeah. So this is the only brand I've found. I think that, like, we'll go through Neocolor and stuff like that. I think that they tried to attempt this. However, Prima actually made a water soluble pastel. It still has its things about it, and we'll talk about some of that. But the watercolor pencils, you know, why do we have so many mediums is what I get asked a lot when it comes to mixed media. And I don't use every single one of these mediums in every single one of my paintings. But what I have done over time is I've collected a collection of images that are pieces of my paintings that I really liked. And what I'm finding is that I like some types of materials over top of other materials in particular colors. Maybe I like the way that my yellow watercolor pencil looks on top of you know, a certain kind of paint. And so I don't use them in every painting, but I do experiment with them enough and use them in my sketchbooking practice so that I know what I want when I want it. Let's not use a light color. Okay. So watercolor pencils, you know, basically they go on like a colored pencil. These ones, one of the reasons that I like them is that they're more of like they're more crayon-y than other watercolor pencils. I don't feel like they feel so much like a watercolor pencil. And then they can be modified with water. I generally modify just about everything with water, mainly because what I'm working on in my work and what we're going to learn a lot about is layering, making different layers that vary in translucency. And I think that, you know, especially with the watercolor pencils, they're great base layer because they're not opaque. They come out kind of translucent. They act very much like a watercolor does. And they actually don't have as much problems when they dry dissipating when you add other water to it, which is always a good thing. Like I said, watercolors, I do use watercolors. I have a very nice extensive set of watercolors. However, you know, they're a top layer thing. Like I said before, adding water to the top of them is just going to make them destroyed. So it's not always a good thing. The oil pastels, the water soluble oil pastels. Here's what they look like. They're Art Philosophy brand. They look like kids' crayons almost. They're like super fat. Okay. Couple of notes about them. They're great. They're great. They, you know, they act like an oil pastel. So you can smear them together like you would an oil pastel. And then you can actually add water and the water starts to modify them. What's really nice about them is that they hold their integrity a little bit. Unlike other water modified mediums, they still kind of keep your original base marks. It just kind of gives it what I call the halo, which is when the pigment spreads outside of the original marks and creates kind of a translucent base with them. I still stick by the comment that maybe that oil pastels, when it comes to on top of acrylic paint or on top of acrylic paint plus its friends, that it needs to be the top layer. You don't want to put it underneath it and then try and work with it because it just becomes difficult. These are only, I mean, they're very basic colors. You're not going to mix them very much, but for what they are, they're pretty spectacular. Another option that people can have is a water-soluble wax pastel. So this is what I was saying earlier. This is, I think, what they were trying to accomplish before the water-soluble oil pastel was neo pastels. They're great. You know, when you want to just do loose marks, you want to see what it's going to happen with it later. They're very bright and they're vibrant. They're high quality. I usually have like a color set around that I like. You know, like obviously I decided one day that ochre was my dream and went out and bought a bunch in ochre and orange. We'll talk a lot about what colors mean in abstract work, but for now, I tend to have like different materials that are in different selections of colors. I tend to just do that in general. Watercolor sticks. I wish I liked this more than I do. This is a Danielle Smith. I tend to, with water soluble materials, I like to dip it in the water and then play with it. And that it doesn't, with the watercolor stick, I feel like I struggle with it. It's one of my favorite colors because it's quinacridone burnt scarlet, which is, I mean, I feel like I could eat it sometimes. But it really, maybe it's the gesso on the paper. It's an option for people who feel like they want to be a little rougher. I think maybe, you know, they want to push down a little harder. It'll be good for people who do that. It looks really beautiful over top of, and in the WhatsApp, I will add photos of each of these so that you guys can see how they dry and they look dried on top of them. And then I will also label what is in each of them. But it looks nice over top of the little speckled sparkle, which is a win-win. Okay, make sure I don't forget anything. I do use chalk sometimes. People ask me this a lot. Pan pastel is a big favorite for people. Like, again, it's a top layer thing. It's like a last minute thing. It doesn't feel as expressive. It can be used with water, but it just kind of seems messy to me. But I do have sticks, like I said, various colors of soft pastels that I like. If you have soft pastels, a lot of people really like to add lines with them, and I encourage you to try and experiment with them. And I will tell you what I can or do know about them. Before we get into paint, I have one more material that I use a lot. I use coffee a lot, instant coffee a lot. I took a class once on sketching, old forms of sketching, and coffee's been around for a really long time as a material. This is my tiny little espresso cup. Leah's dying over there because she loves my little tiny espresso cup, but full of organic fair trade instant coffee. Okay. You can use this in two different ways. I like to actually make like a liquid. This is actually full of like a really dense liquid. I would say that you're probably doing like the amount of coffee crystals to the amount of water you put in here. Like it's a half and half kind of thing. The other option you do have is you can apply the crystals straight to your paper and spray them. If you spray them and let them dry, they will create little circular marks as the coffee disintegrates into the paper. What happened with coffee was I took a class on sketching with coffee, which in the old days, it was like a little sumi brush like this. And then they would, it's creates lines, and it's a beautiful color, and it's really quite magical. What I actually learned about it was, as I was working within my paintings, that the coffee would separate two layers of paint and make one look like it was like visually floating on top of another layer. And so I have stepped away from using coffee the way that I used to, which was for its richness and its color, and started using it more for its ability to make acrylic paint kind of step up a little bit. As a previous sculptor, I'm always interested in how I can make my abstract paintings look almost 3D, and how I can make people a little confused as to how those layers work. And coffee was the secret weapon for a really long time on that. It's also, again, a great base layer. If you don't know what you're going to do, it washes out. You can remove it really easily with a towel, and it just leaves kind of really faint marks. It soaks into the paper really well. What I will tell you is that I often will spray my coffee. So I always use the clear gesso, but I don't want the acidity of the coffee breaking down the paper. So I will use hairspray on top of it, just as a way of like taking care of the painting a little bit. In sketching or in paper pieces that aren't going to be sold, I don't necessarily worry about that as much, but I definitely try to control my layers so that they don't get too mushy together. Hold on, I'm gonna take a drink so I don't lose my voice.
Can I ask a question about the hairspray?
Please.
I'm just thinking, you're using that to fix things. So
Yeah,
I'm assuming like everything's dry and then you apply it. And
the reason I don't use like a fixative is that I don't always want the thickness that a traditional fixative provides. The hairspray can be a little thinner. Also, part of that is that like travel pack idea. You can find hairspray in travel size. So it's a tiny little bottle and it's anywhere you are. And I totally am the girl that ends up starting a piece, in a cafe somewhere and having to fix something. And so hairspray was a great fixative. It's not my last layer. I actually use a traditional fixative as a last layer, but it's a quick and easy in between layer.
Got it.
I'm talking like old school 80s hairnet. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to use the ones that have the pump things. You want to use the ones that just spray like a spray can. It's accessible, which is always something I'm thinking about a lot, is how can I make sure this is something I can get when especially out here, we don't have access to a lot. But a traditional fixative would work as well. You just, it's about the thickness of that layer, and you're going to find your own preferences.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. How many people in here have painted with acrylic before? Perfect. How many people have preferences on the weight of their acrylic? Meh. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit. So acrylic paint comes in a variety of things. I mean, I don't know if anybody has been following Golden recently, but Golden's really trying to go into the new century with their acrylic paint. And so they're coming out with a lot of new types of acrylic paint. Like I said before, I am very comfortable just using colors that come in bottles predetermined. I do create my own colors often, but they always start as a pre-done. I know how to mix colors from primaries. It's just not something that I find enjoyable, mainly because, again, coming back to the idea of our layers in our abstract paintings, having a variety of opacity and translucency, using your acrylic paint, you can have a variety of matte versus satin that will also allow your layers to kind of make that 3D thing happen. And so I tend to use Liquitex and Golden. It's very high end, please don't get me wrong. I use Amsterdam and De La Rowney student varieties all the time. It's just that lately Liquitex has come out, as well as Golden has come out with some new types of acrylic paint that are really exciting. I'm gonna do acrylic paint 101 really quick right now. So acrylic paint comes in a variety of what I call weights. I'm sure everybody has their own term for what it really is. High flow is the thinnest. That actually that wetting agent that I use in the water can be added to acrylic paint to make it higher flow like this. It's probably how they originally did it. It usually comes with a little nozzle like this, you know, because you're going to be using it. It's very thin. With the high flows, I tend to use a scraping tool instead of a painting tool. So, you know, like a literally plaster tool. I use spatulas. I do have fancy high-end like silicone things. They don't seem to work the same. And maybe I'm just old school and I just like my old-fashioned drywall scraper. I don't know. The high flow are gonna be more translucent. They're gonna be thinner, and they're gonna be something that you can use to cover like a larger part of the actual paper. I then started playing with slow drying acrylics. So the high flow acrylic is going to dry really fast. That's why we like acrylics, right? It's because it dries really quickly. We're not standing around for centuries waiting for it to dry. The new Golden Opens, which have the black bottom of their tube, are going to be more in range with the dry time that you would get from an oil. They take quite a bit longer. We're talking 48 hours to fully cure. They're beautiful though, and they have some really great pigments. I'm into this transparent red iron oxide that I've been obsessed with for a bit. I don't use them a lot because I'm impatient and I don't want to wait for it to dry. That's why I'm working in acrylics. However, there's a thickness that you can get from them. If you find that you are a textural abstract artist, you find that you really like the texture of the paint to stand out of the paper, this is a great opportunity. This is a great way for you to do that without having to add something else to it. So,
can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Yes, I wonder what's the brand of the yellow color that you just used.
That's Golden. It's just their high flow acrylic version. Sorry.
Golden.
Yeah, it's Golden.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's Hansa yellow medium. It's a beautiful yellow. I actually, you know, as we spend more time talking about color, yellow was really hard for me to buy into. It took me 10 years before I started to really like to work with yellow. But this Hansa yellow was one of the reasons I think I fell in love. So this is a high flow, meaning thinnest, near waterish. This is just a fluid acrylic. Okay, it's not as thin. It's not as thin as the high flow, not as thick as the other. It is the traditional paint that I work in. It's a little more opaque. The colors are the same again with Golden. And it can be used in all layers, which is something that I can really appreciate. Now, Golden is blowing my mind because has anybody started working with the matte acrylics yet? The flat mattes? It's fairly new. They have two versions now. So they have a flat matte here, which came in these tiny little bottles. It dries with like a chalky-ish like a top layer. It's really opaque in comparison. However, it's relatively thin and kind of easy to use. I love it on panels because it like binds with the panel differently, and it comes out really matte. It comes out so beautiful and like velvety. However, Golden also has come out with matte fluid acrylics. So these ones are a little bit, what they've done is they've literally added chalk to the acrylic so that it dries even more matte than this other version that they came up with. However,
Wait, chalk, you said? They
Yeah.
put chalk in it?
That's what the guy at the art supply place told me is you really have to spend time actually shaking it up because you have to get it fully mixed. And I had once been told that if you add chalk, which is actually like a thing people add, if you add chalk to your gesso and you want to say do a wood panel, it will come out paper-like. So this is something that had been on my radar. But it's an interesting new material. I tend to work with thinner paints first. My first 2 or 3 layers are thinner paints. And then my more opaque and thicker paints tend to be my top layers. So I have only worked with it a very little at this point, but it's very exciting. I got turquoise, Stalo turquoise, which is really beautiful. It adds a dimension similar to the coffee, where if parts of your painting don't reflect light the same, meaning that they're not as shiny, they're going to draw the eye. And the whole intention with an abstract painting is how long can you get somebody to stare at it? Because the more that they're staring at it, the further that they're delving into the painting and the further they're delving into themselves, and the more the experience as a whole will be for them. They're not looking at something and identifying what the painting is about and moving on. They're trying to figure it out. Using matte versus, these normal acrylics that are kind of shiny, using opaque paintings and translucent paintings and layering them together brings people on a journey. And then we're going to add on top of those basics, we're going to add color, and we're going to add, lines in there, and we're going to add shapes in there. But knowing your materials takes time. It's always kind of the hardest thing. And I still don't think that I know my materials as much as I would like to know my materials. And the last kind of acrylic paint that I want to bring out is a heavy body paint. It doesn't take as long to dry as the open, but it's heavier, it's thicker, it's textural. And I have been obsessed with these, which I think is Liquitex's attempt at making them matte, but they're not matte. They're called muted violet. And they're just a thicker paint. Why confuse yourself with 500 different weights of paints? I tend to, like I said, be drawn to, I like my violets to be thicker paints. I like my blues to usually be a more translucent paint because I know I'm going to use them differently. Everybody's going to have their own preferences. And I kind of like having a little bit of variety. I wish you guys could see this one right here better when it dries. And I put pictures in the WhatsApp app. It's absolutely stunning with the coffee underneath the muted violet. It's a really special kind of paint.
Actually, your color, I'm actually kind of drooling over your color. You must be using you must be using an iPhone or something, because the color is great.
It's just the iPhone.
Just the iPhone. It looks so great.
Yeah. Well,
and the light in your studio, it's really wonderful.
Well, we do pay for lighting. Like we have lighting for our classes and stuff like that. We have a Patreon that we run through our gallery. And so we do a lot of conversations online about artwork. So we've definitely paid for a setup to do that. Top layer, it's the last layer. Abstract work kind of works bigger than in and into the smallest little things are done kind of in the top layers, the tiny dots, the little lines, these things that we're going to use to really control the composition. So I have a couple of materials that I use only on the top layer. I'm not going to demo gold leaf today, but I use a lot of gold leaf in my abstract paintings. And then I also use pigmented gold powder right here. It's just Pearl X. In theory, it can be added to mediums and things like that. I tend to put it as a top layer. It's one of my go-tos when I'm looking to add to control, like I'm looking at a painting and I feel like it kind of blurs out almost, and I want to create a spot where people are drawn to. It creates light over different colors. It's really great. Like this gold over top of this purple is a really special, it just brushes on. It's a pigment, you know, you can add it to a medium, you can add it to water. I tend to just brush it on. Okay, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Brush care. I always like to mention brush care. When you're using multiple mediums, please take care of your brushes differently, obviously, because if you're just using acrylic, you can be kind of a jerk to them. I use the Master's brush cleaner and preserver. You know, it's like a bar, rub my brush in it. I wash my brushes once a week because I'm lazy, but I do use that, at least to do that. It used to just be other things. Okay, so those are our basics. We're not going to be doing any exercises that takes everything that we have today. We're actually going to work on some exercises that are starting to develop your own language of abstract work. I'm actually move the camera a little bit so you guys can see this other page that I have prepared. Hold on.
Can I ask another question?
You can ask all the questions. I have so much
All the questions.
information. Please.
So do you always work flat, or are you doing that for the benefit of us and the camera, or do you work on an easel? What is there a regular way you work, or anything?
So I have a large table. I have a table that is large enough for a 60 by 60 painting flat, but I also have an oversized easel. I like to, there is the earlier stages of paintings, I like the drips, right? The drips aren't going to happen as much if you're working flat. What I do like about working flat is that when you're working with acrylics and you want to create layers of color, they work a little bit better flat because then they can dry and the water can pool a little bit and kind of evaporate kind of straight up. So it really depends on what part of the process that I'm in. Right now I'm working on a 60 by 60 that's on unstretched canvas. And so it's flat a lot, mainly because I don't have the system to attach it to my easel without a frame, right? I also think that scraping works better on flat surfaces. And you'll see that a lot of my layers are large scrapes. And so that is, it comes to how, if you prefer to be a brush one or a scraper, you'll find that out. Okay, and this is my favorite workout. So the key, honestly, to a successful abstract painting is loose, being loose, not holding too tightly to any step of the process or anything that you're doing. So I like to start with what I call a rage scribble. Some people like to rage dance. I like to rage scribble. I feel like it gets my jitters out, and it's not something that I work into the paintings always, but it's like done on a piece of paper beforehand. So if you have any kind of pencil, color pencil, coloring utensil, you can use it on a piece of paper. The whole intention of this is you're just getting it out. You have to loosen up because you want it, you know, being loose and gestural means that you need to hold the crayon or pencil or whatever. I do use this a lot as a non-water soluble pencil type, you know. You hold them looser towards the back of your item so that you can be looser about it. And I just give myself a couple of minutes just to literally rage scribble. Why? You know, it's interesting to cover a piece of paper with a thing, to let your arms just get it out, because we know that we want to be loose in whatever we're doing. And then I like to use the water-soluble graphite.
Did you say rage scribble?
Rage scribble.
Rage scribble. Okay. I was like,
my first step of the process. True story. And then I get it wet, take my water, take my scraper often just to move it around a little bit, towel it up. And if I still feel like I need some centering, I might do it a second time. Sometimes I will, you know, really get into it. I'll put other layers of other things. I think it's something I start most of my classes out. I know lots of people like to meditate and things like that. I just ask that we do 30 seconds of rage scribbling, especially if you have a larger size piece of paper. You can really get big with your rage scribbling. You gotta loosen yourself up before you can start to experiment and play as much as abstract is about.
You know, Kirista, that's interesting that you say that, because I was talking to a woman who's an educator, and she said for like little kids who are having trouble controlling the, you know, like trouble like making their pencil or whatever it is, do what they want to, she recommends you start with your whole arm.
Yeah.
She's like, if they start with the whole arm, then it seems to work. She said it like works down the arm. Then you can get like more control as you get looser.
That's interesting, because you know the thing about abstract art is no matter what, it's never gonna look the same every time you do it. There's no formula that can make it exactly the same. So there has to be a looseness about it so that you can react. I mean, being an artist or doing artwork or any kind of creative work is really about responding to situations and making new decisions.
Right.
Rage scribbling seems to be this thing that let's go of perfectionism a little bit. Let's go of control needs. So when you find yourself sitting in front of the TV with your family or whatnot, consider a couple of rage scribbles. It's really a lot of fun. One of the exercises that I would like to leave with you all as homework can be done with acrylic paint or watercolor. I'm going to use watercolor just for ease of colors right now. There is a new book out by Courtney Cerruti, I think is how you say her last name. I don't know, so don't quote me. And she did a project where she did what she called a circle a day, every day for a year. So every night she sat down, and this was part of her project. I read this book the very beginning of COVID, right when we started lockdown. I had just moved out of my house and had moved into a very strange living situation. I was needing to find a lot of stability and guidance, and this kind of worked into that. I use watercolors again, just out of ease. But the idea is that you're starting to develop your own visual language around color. This can be done at night. I tend to do, 20 or 30 circles at a time. You're going to choose different colors and layer them together in a way of discovering new color combinations or creating your own visual language. I need to get my clean water, which is right here. Hold on. Okay, it's as simple. It's literally making a circle. It seems so silly, right? Well, here's what you're going to learn with making a circle. You're going to have a couple of first layers. I always start with oranges, mainly because I'm obsessed. You don't have to start with oranges. I'll start with purple on this one. I work on multiple at a time so that they can dry in between. We're not concerned so much how perfect your circle is. We're not even concerned if it looks like a circle, really. It's a blot. It's very similar to an ink blot. Okay, and your first layer, you're gonna let it dry. My first layer is already dry because Astoria is extremely warm today. And then you're gonna go in for a second color. Now, your decision here can be anything. Are you going to cover the whole circle with your second color? Are you going to add it to the water? Like if this blue one here has water still in it, I'm going to take some orange. I'm going to be really daring. I'm going to add it in and see how it sits. Okay. And we're going to let that dry. We're going to go back to our orange up here that's really beautiful and choose a new color. I'd like to encourage you to try at least 3 colors.
I'm watching Tosh Ween is doing it right now.
It's so good. Sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice already.
You guys should feel free to, with whatever materials you have, while Kirista's talking, feel free to follow along with what she's doing.
And, this becomes addicting. I have done, 500 of these things. My girlfriend always used to make jokes that, is it circle time?
It's circle time. I see Rebecca's been sketching. It's nice. I like it that everybody, I can see people have been, I know these people, they can't stand to sit for an hour without doing something. Great work, guys.
Yes. So you know, you want to, I encourage you. So here's some thoughts on the 3 layers that you're going to put into this. You know, nobody wants mud. Mud is when you use a cool color with a warm color. You know, that's blues, greens, cool colors, oranges, reds, warm colors. Purple is about half and half depending on the shade of purple. I encourage you to do your first 2 layers, 1 temperature, let it fully dry, bring in your 3rd layer of a different temperature, and see how that 3rd layer affects the way that the other 2 layers look together. I encourage you to try it with different levels of wetness too, especially if you're using watercolors. You know, see how the colors mesh together. Also, they're going to dry completely and look completely different when they're done drying. This is how you're starting your visual diary. Keep the ones that you like. Make notes on the side. I always write down what colors I actually put into it in case it turns into something that I want to use later. So part of abstract art, in my experience with it, has been learning what you're drawn to. Everybody's drawn to something different. When you find yourself drawn to a color too much, challenge yourself to try a different color. Don't allow yourself, gosh, hold on. Don't allow yourself to get stuck in one color family or one set of colors. Also, if you have graphite, and especially if you have water-soluble graphite, use it as one of your layers. It creates its own magic because water-soluble graphite tends to dry shiny, which is, again, another like way that we're working within this delicate layering. Okay. Does anybody have color circles that they're particularly happy with? Another way to use color circles, and something that when I work with students on a regular basis, is think about color circles when you think about your memories. Because when I first started doing abstract painting, what I was really working on was trying to record my memories, trying to record how I felt in certain moments. Memories are interesting though, because they're fuzzy. We fill them in with our own ideas. So they're a great place to get color schemes when you're thinking about that time. Like one of my very first paintings that I really did this with was a memory I had of riding a tilt-a-whirl with my mother, you know, at a carnival. I think I was probably 18 years old. The colors were really vivid to me though, because I remembered for some reason that I was wearing a red shirt and that the carnival was really like a blue and white and yellow. And I used that to create an abstract painting. And I found that you can use these circles, this experience of bringing in new colors, figuring out what works together. They're going to trigger memories. You're going to think about moments in which things look a certain way. At the beach, we obviously see a lot of blue. You know, we have it's the river here as well. So this is an opportunity for you to use this kind of at any time that you want to do it. Another exercise that we can work on as you're letting your circles dry. Similar to the rage scribbling, a little looser. Composition is going to be one of the harder things about abstract art. We think that we're just going to get in there and make something that's really good. One of the ways that you can develop that is a lot of people will take a pencil and just start to fill in, and you're kind of scribbling is what you're doing. Children are really good at abstract art. You're going to fill it in with a series of scribbles. Okay. Some people like to find that they like to create extra up here. I'm using a non-water soluble pencil for this, just an FYI. Okay. You can not look at it as the best idea. and then choose one of the color schemes that was successful in your circle. I'm going to go with this lovely blue, yellow, and orange. Basic. And you start to fill in the spaces that you have created on your scribble paper. Okay, what you're going to learn, I'm using watercolor still at this point. You can use acrylic, only because my watercolor is set up easier than my acrylic is today. You're going to learn how colors start to react to each other, how boundaries are defined by the darkness of different colors. This allows you to transfer the information that you're getting from your circles into, you know, another version before you start considering, you know, what is my own visual language going to look like? What am I going to be drawn to? What kind of marks make me, you know, are my voice? That's the more difficult part of abstract painting is we are making up the language as we go. It's entirely made up. We're not reproducing concepts or visions that we already see. Okay, it's a little bit like coloring right now, but it's about creating, flexing your muscles, you know. Figuring out how to make things pop.
So Kirista, I know you've gone through a lot of materials,
Yeah.
but you're gonna, they're pretty flexible on what they use, right? It's kind of like what they've got. So you're just,
I use whatever's around. I have a couple of different types of things. I always have a sketchbook, a tin of watercolors, and some kind of graphite utensil. That is the most basic, minimalist way to work. You can work anywhere you are. You can work in a coffee shop. You can work, you know, on a boardwalk, whatever you're doing. You can work in the office at work as a banker for several years. I did that. When I am working in my studio, I generally work with acrylic and then the water-soluble graphite pencils. And usually the neo colors tend to be included in almost all of them. It's going to be about personal preference more than, you know, access to materials. You know, you're going to find you like the way that things act more.
guys, I see some of you working, and we'd love to see what you're doing. So at any point, you can just snap a picture and send it through the WhatsApp chat like this. Here, I'll show you how easy it is. I'm just going to take a picture of you all here like this. So I've just got my camera up here. I'm taking a picture. So you just open the thread and then you can send it across. So as you're working, you can send a piece or the whole thing. Or you don't have to, but I think it'd be nice to see what people are doing.
Interesting.
Oh, that looks great.
Oh,
So that's the
Yeah,
different,
nice.
so that's the different types, types of acrylic. The yellow is that
Nice,
super
Leslie.
high flow. You can see that it's very see-through. You can see the speckles that came from the charcoal, the powdered charcoal. The maroon is a fluid acrylic, and then that dark layer is actually matte phthalo turquoise. So you can see how they look differently and independently.
Nice, Jean.
I love purple.
Leslie's going, Jean's going.
Yeah.
I bet this is a good way to start, Leslie. Leslie's had an accident with her hand, so she hasn't been able to draw with her normal
I can't.
facility.
It's weird to hold it. I had a partial amputation of my thumb. So.
Nice, Tashween. I'm sorry, not nice that you
Not
had a partial
laughing at me. It's
amputation of
okay.
your thumb.
I just was laughing because I said partial amputation during this amazing art class. I'm
Yeah.
probably freaking people out. It's okay. It's
But abstract art, you know, that's the thing about it is,
Yeah.
it's a reaction to a moment. It's literally the most present you can get.
Yeah.
We're not recreating something that already exists.
Mhm.
You can redefine it every time you do it.
Yeah.
And my work generally, you know, you can see that it's my work, but it definitely looks different on a
Yeah.
consistent basis. So this is a great opportunity for you to figure out how your new arm is going to work for you. How's it
Right.
work now? And what can you do with it?
Well, and I work a lot with my fingers because I work a lot in oil pastel. And so I do a lot of that. So and I sort of lost the feeling on my thumb, but it's actually doing okay. I'm just using some stick pencils. They're Prismacolor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And those circles were oil pastels.
Well, now you can use stick smudgers instead, I guess, than your fingers.
Yeah, I'm excited to get those water soluble ones.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
And I have water soluble wax paint that's Cretacolor. You know, I use that on top of oil pastel work. So
One thing I want to, go ahead, Krista.
I have one of our artists for the gallery does abstract work. She uses mineral paint.
Oh.
And then does her top layer in that pan pastel.
Yeah.
And uses the pan pastel, I assume, like to create the colors.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible the way that layering two mediums that seem like they don't really go together and what they create. So I think it's always worth, you know, noting that, you know, letting things dry and trying something new on top can make a huge difference.
One of the things I wanted to point out is that you guys in my classes, you have a lot of these materials. Not all of them, certainly not instant coffee, and not the cool like pastel pens and crayons and oil pastels.
Instant coffee. I have 100% used coffee done in a shop that I got or what I was drinking. Also, teas can be used. They tend to be more red colors, but you know, anything like any kind of paint that you're going to use, it's going to have different opacities and they're going to have different colors based on how it's made.
Right. So one of the things I wanted to let you guys know is I'm about to send a list out to everyone that for drawing supplies that we'll need for the rest of the year in my classes. And there is Bristol paper on that list. There is some fantastic charcoal on that list that could easily be powdered up. There is newsprint and watercolor paper. So there's a fixative spray on there. So there are a lot of the things that I'm asking you to, anyway, this is a kit that will be 10% off. It'll be mailed to you for $47 wherever you live in the US from Artists and Craftsmen. So a lot of those,
my favorite art supply store.
They're fantastic. A lot of those, I'll send the link out for that thing so you can order that if you would like, because there's ink you'll be using. I have a feeling you're going to be using all this stuff with Karista's class. So
we won't be going crazy. It won't be crazy all the time, but what we do find.
Oh, nice, Rebecca.
What we do find is that you get attached to certain materials because they work better for you. You know, it's hard enough to be working and thinking about composition all the time. Ooh, I love that colored in. It's hard enough to be thinking about that all the time than to try and go too far with your materials, you know. Use something that you're comfortable with, you're consistently comfortable with, that you want to spend some time with. You're going to make ugly paintings too. That is a big part of abstract art. I always make the joke that abstract art is like the hero's journey, you know, and you always get to the part where you're kind of losing. And that's when your painting is just horrible looking. You always know that on the other side of that though is success. In the end, I'm almost done if I hate it. That is, I swear, every time. I'm almost done if I hate it. I also don't get too precious with it. You're going to love it in the beginning. You're going to hate it in the middle. You'll love it in the end again.
Nice, Tashween. Like it. Is anybody finding a material that they hadn't thought of using? Anybody using coffee?
I'm discovering that a really good way to freak out your cat is to use the squirt bottle.
That's real.
In a Manhattan size apartment, that is definitely,
That is like, he
that
knows he
is
did
the
something wrong.
reals.
He didn't, but he knows.
We will, when we get into just the classes every week, the more consistent classes, one of the weeks we will look at the work artist Flora Bowley's work.
Yeah.
And she is very drip heavy, but not like Pollock. Like she has a system that she uses to create her paintings. And I think that we're going to find the squirt bottles to be especially helpful then. She also has some really interesting concepts of
Ooh,
like,
gee.
cover up 90% of your paper. Start again.
Yeah.
Even if you love it, start again.
For those who don't know, Flora Bowley is a pretty successful abstract artist in Portland. You either love her or you hate her. But she has she's done a lot for opening people up to painting, which is
her
huge.
process has a lot of value.
Yeah. Jean, I like how that's coming along. Let's see, what else? Nice.
Has anyone found a color, two colors together that they didn't think they would like together?
Good question.
Because I have one of my surprise color combinations that I never thought that I would like together is fluorescent red, which if you know my work, that is in all of my pieces.
Yeah.
And green gold, which is like the color of this pan pastel, right? And then it's like fluorescent red. They're so beautiful together. And it wasn't until I was doing one of these circles that I was like, I'm going to try something new. You know, I'm going to really go outside my own comfort zone. And then of course I had to buy all the accessories that go with so that I could work with it more, which I just think is having an art problem.
That is definitely a supplies issue. It's just a thing.
No, I have gotten much better. We actually in Astoria, the organization that's next to our studio, did a fundraiser this week where they collected everybody's art supplies that they weren't using and then resold them. They called it Artful
Oh,
Jumble. And I only found a table. And I was like, good for you, Kirista. You didn't bring home anything you don't need. You just found a table. Okay, I have two homework. They're observational homeworks. I know we still have, 20 minutes or so, but it's two things that I want you to be watching for out in the world over the next week before we come together again. Okay. This is what I call collecting. I actually used to physically have like a little sketchbook thing that I would collect things in, so that when I was looking for source information for my paintings, I was sourcing from myself instead of sourcing from the internet. What I'd like you to be watching for out in the world is patterns that you come in contact with that you find interesting. You're gonna find them on buildings. You're gonna find them in your house. You're gonna find them on the Tupperware that you use or the way that you make dinner. You can draw them in a sketchbook if you would like. You can take a picture of them on your iPhone if you would like, or you can take a mental note for yourself. Start to collect some of those patterns that exist out in the world. The other thing is a similar observation, which is that your job is to start looking at the way colors interact together that you like. Is there a flower that you like? You like it particularly because it looks a certain way. If you take 30 seconds, you look at that flower and you think, what are the colors that flower is that is making me drawn to it? So I want you to start creating kind of source information for yourself. We're going to use these, and you can take pictures of the things that you appreciate the color, and we can share them on the WhatsApp, because we will actually use them to create color palettes and abstract paintings. So we're going to start using the world that we're experiencing in our paintings as a way of, like I said, starting to really develop that visual language. It's just taking a little bit of extra moments of being present, trying to get out there and source from the things that are around you. I'm sure Leah has a lot to source from in her studio. Or I guess at your show this,
They're all gone. They're out now.
how do you feel about that?
It looks great. I feel great. I feel like I have room again.
Okay. I'm going to take some pictures of some of these that I've been working on. I'm going to.
Yes, please. And everybody, show us also. Try something. Show something. I
know
want
that
to
it can
see.
be kind of confusing when you start to think about what a visual language might be. And I always have this interesting example, which is that in my early painting, there was a particular style of mark, and I'm going to put it on this painting, that I found myself drawn to making a lot. And I would put it in my paintings, and then it would be like this thing that was always like in my back pocket. If I felt like I couldn't pull a composition together, I would use it. And as I was reflecting on why am I drawn to this thing that I keep creating, right? I realized that it symbolized me and my two siblings. I'm one of three sisters. And this mark was a representation of me and my two siblings. And I realized that I would bring it into situations, paintings, like I said, that were being difficult, that felt like I needed a little bit of control or comfort in. You're going to find that you will find comfort marks that you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to do this. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay. We'll try and find better opportunities of photography. Excuse me, folks.
This is sort of reminding me of that 1957 film of Picasso. Have you guys ever seen it? The one where they set up
On the
his
glass.
a glass and
Yeah.
he draws on the glass
pretty
on
cool.
the camera. So you watch him like make a bunch of drawings. Like there's 1,000 Picasso drawings that show up, then get erased. Show up, then get erased. Show up and get erased.
Part of it is a little bit, of that. I know a lot of abstract painters that will take one piece of paper and turn it into 30 different tiny little squares so that they can work on like the repetition of it, developing it. My partner's a ceramicist, and she reminds me all of the time that art is definitely still a muscle memory thing, right?
Yeah.
We actually have a Time magazine from the 50s that's a really big Picasso article. It's like 150 pages of Picasso. It's very interesting to see early media about him, Well, this one doesn't look as good. So drying. Okay.
Now I'm using the excuse of coffee to make myself a cup of coffee, and then I'm going to draw with it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
In Portland, there's actually a group that sketches with coffee. They get together at a coffee shop and they sketch with coffee. They were very delightful. That's how I kind of got on the coffee thing in the first place, right? I'm letting my coffee painting dry right now, and then I will take a picture of it for folks.
Too much color.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we run out of time, or anything else that you would like some more information about before we go into next week?
The question about the prepping of the paper.
Yeah.
You taped it first and then you put down the clear gesso, or you did the reverse?
I've done it both ways.
Okay.
It's only taped because the taping allowed me to have individual squares
Yeah.
to work the materials with. Sorry. And I don't think that it matters. You know, people use taping for different reasons. So like they say, stretch the paper. I just use it so that it has nice crisp edges.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, I also like to gesso either way. Like I will gesso 20 pieces of paper so that they're ready and they're drying, you know, and then tape them as I work them. Or like today, I taped all of this and then I gessoed it because it was already taped down.
Does water, if you're just going to use watercolor, does it behave differently?
I have worked both of them and it has taken me some time to make the watercolor work the way that my acrylic does. What I do like about watercolor, you know, is that you have the ability to mix it a little differently on the paper. I like watercolor on top of the gessoed paper.
Okay.
That is my preferred way to work it. It's just not, you're gonna work it slower. Your watercolor has to dry in between and it's just a little longer, right?
Yep.
You can do that though with a hairdryer. So it's like, it's there and available. Oh, my phone is gone. Who knows? That's interesting. Well, at this point, I think it's okay. Not really sure what oh, it's dead. Well, that's good. Sorry, everybody.
It's okay.
I have noticed at certain times of day, my internet will go out actually, like, because there's a lot of people using it. So at my Wednesday class, which is at 6 o'clock at night, tends to be interrupted more often. And like, yeah, I'll be like teaching and then I'll be off the call. Somebody else will be.
Astoria doesn't have the best internet, you know.
Yeah.
So we definitely have that issue a lot as well.
Do you have the extenders? The extenders have helped a lot for me with that issue, but they don't.
We have them in our, you know, luckily we got the way that the building is set up, this space has the most energy Wi-Fi wise. And that's because Glenn put the extenders in here,
right?
Specifically because we live stream so much.
Right.
Sometimes it's just an Astoria issue.
Fun,
you know?
Jean. And Kirista, that coffee muted violet and matte blue is really lovely.
Yeah, it's
yum.
You know, depending on how dark you make your, oh, Jean, that's so good. I'm loving all of this actually. It makes me so happy.
Aren't they great? It was cute because, you know, like you hadn't exactly said, okay, everybody start doing it, but I could see like Tashween's little paintbrush like going. And then I saw like Rebecca kind of like, you know, doing it. And then Leslie started like moving. And then I saw Jean like put her head down and I was like, oh yeah, now I know they're all starting to work.
Okay. Sorry.
Well, it's getting easier the more I'm using my hand. You know, it stiffens up a lot. So
I think this might be just what you need, Leslie, to get back in.
It's good. I mean, this is a lot of color for me, but you know, I like it.
Don't be afraid on the circle.
It's these two fingers that were injured. So, you know, which are the ones
I mean, I guess it's a relearning now, huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's just that it's weak. So, you know, I still do PT every day and it'll get there.
It will. And I actually was born without the ability to walk and they had to do surgery.
Yeah.
So as a child, I learned to walk with a cast.
Oh.
They took the cast off and I had to relearn to walk.
Right.
And it's amazing how resilient we can be and able to modify things, right?
Yeah. It becomes the new normal.
Yeah. And I haven't done any detail work. So, you know, I think it'll work.
I think this is good. I think you should go. You don't have, this is nice because it means you can do detail work, but it's a different kind of work.
Yeah.
You don't have to be so worried about control. And I mean, you're still going to be controlled. I know there's a lot of thought and process, but it's less about.
And I'm not in the studio today because it's too hot out there. I'm at in my home office.
We actually took our dogs home because it was too hot in the studio in our house.
Yeah.
For them.
My
So-
cats are laying around like, just,
Is anybody, I would like to encourage the people who are working in circles to overlap your circles, or not like circles on top of circles, but like work on one circle to adjust that is the composition, and then see how you can get your colors to interact within that circle.
Yeah.
It's a challenge sometimes, especially since, like I said, I don't really like dirty abstract artwork. So I can understand how it would be, you might not want to, hold on. We're getting the phone fixed. My tech department has shown up to help me out.
let's see, Edith. Ooh, very vibrant color. Wonderful.
Ooh, I like that.
Mhm. You see why this thread is important, because we can actually see what everybody is working on. I think it's important
Hold on.
to be able to see what everybody's doing. Just partly because that's the feeling of being in a class,
Mm-hmm.
in the same room. And also because I just think it's very inspiring to see what people are doing. It's different. I see a big, bright, colorful painting behind Rebecca, but I don't know what's on her pad.
What's that?
I see a big, bright, colorful painting
Yeah.
behind you, but I don't know what's on your pad.
Oh, that's my underpainting for my whatever I'm working on.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Audrey even said something. Yep, we're good. Audrey even said something to me about charging it, and
Oh.
I thought fully charged was going to be good enough, but clearly not. 1 hour is clearly my maximum. How's your computer? I'm good. My computer is over halfway. Thank you.
These are
Okay.
looking awesome.
So here is one of the layers that I did the coffee. You can see I did a really large coffee layer here. This is the darkness of the coffee. Sorry, I'm gonna move some things around. Okay, I use scrapers a lot. You'll see that in my work. It's my tool of choice. Here's my coffee layer. I'm blotting it out to remove some of it so that I can work with it a little bit differently. Coffee is a dark base to work with, which is really good for challenging yourself. And I'm going to add, we're going to work a little bit with the open. You can see that it's completely different. Okay. So I want to encourage people, as you're working by yourself or right now and you're starting to fill up your page, don't be afraid to leave negative space. Don't be afraid to have dirty paintings and then work it into lightness with them.
So when you say negative space, do you mean space
The
with no
white
paint on it, or
Paint.
space with no paint? Okay.
It can be scary to leave that. You can do good things with both ways. Cover your paper, make it look awesome, work through the really ugly layers. Don't be afraid to come in and re-gesso, but also don't be afraid to leave a little bit of white page for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that happen on the white pages that we can't reproduce, right, is like little specks. If you don't have whiteness, those specks, can't be seen. More complex ways of layering can't be seen. So definitely don't be afraid to leave white space when you're working through some of your compositions. I'm clearly just into the browns today, huh?
That's beautiful. I feel like that is very true, particularly with watery mediums, that it's important to leave white space, regardless of whether you're working figuratively or abstract. That white space is a very powerful, like normally when I'm working in oil or acrylic, I'm like, cover that baby up with dark and put the lights on top, right? You can add the lights in later, but that the actual unpainted surface is an incredibly important part of the piece. And it's hard because you get excited and want to cover everything up, but
Yep.
like, yeah, look at how beautiful, that's beautiful, Kirista.
So here is something,
Look at that.
when I talk about, we worked the big layers first. We did the really big layer of the coffee first. We did the second layer of the open with the translucent red oxide. The third layer is an Indian yellow hue here, okay? I am liking the relationship and the things that they're doing. When you look at an abstract painting, you have to step back from it a lot to figure out if your composition is working. One of the ways that you can do that is by blurring your eyeballs. I always blur my eyeballs and I look at the value of the colors that are on there. The value is the hue, the darkness, the lightness of it. What is sticking out? I know that I want to keep people engaged in my painting. I want to make them stay looking there. That is where, you know, these finishing layers come in. The layers that we bring in, the smaller things, the times that I said those things go on top rather than down in the lower layers. A great example, again, is that color that I was just talking about that I really love. I like to use fluorescent red to move people's eyeballs through a painting. Okay, I like to do it in tiny little amounts, almost in this way of like, you know, I know that they're going to come in, they're going to see the coffee. It's just going to be like with reading, it's just going to be a background thing. They're going to come in and they're going to see this dark orange and they're going to follow it up to the edge of the paper. Then in theory, their eyes have gone off the paper and they're not likely to come back. So you got to draw them back in. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a color. And this is where when you're looking at colors out in the world, you want to be looking at things and thinking to yourself, why am I attracted to that? I'm going to take this fluorescent red, which looks great with everything.
That's how I feel about turquoise.
Yeah, turquoise does look great with everything. It's real. And I'm going to take some and I'm going to make a small collection of dots. Okay. Here's another thing that's important about composition. We'll talk about it a little bit more next week, but you know, odd numbers work better for our brains. So if you're going to do 3 spots of new color, do 3 spots, do 5 spots, do 1, don't do 4. You know, rule of thirds basically. And I'm going to use these little dots to move people through my painting and keep them involved in it.
And here's how that rule follows into representational work. You never show 2 cars, 2 people, rarely. I mean, you can, but almost often it's odd numbers of things.
It's odd numbers.
Trees, people, buildings, like street lights, like whatever it is. You're very often show 1, 3, 5, but 2s and 4s are considered to matchy. It's like starting your landscape painting right at the center.
You know, right. I wonder what really the psychology behind that. Like, is it that we see things in matching, you know, because Americans are taught to read really basically the first couple of letters, not really pay a lot of attention to the middle, the end letters, and then our brain learns how to create the words really quickly.
Right.
I wonder if duplicates do that. 2 cars, you just see cars, you move past it, rather than like 3 cars, you're like, what is the relationship of the cars together?
I suspect that's probably true, but it's definitely a known, like, you know,
and
we talk about it constantly.
In abstract art, you want to, you know, you want to give yourself the best tools to make it as good as possible. And it really helps the odd number of ratio of things really helps. I also come back to, you know, so I've added this fluorescent red, which you guys can't really tell in the picture right here, but I'll take pictures for what's happened. It's all done. And then I like to go and I like to look at it and I like to think to myself, you know, is there an even smaller mark or a smaller statement that will help with this adventure that the eye is going through when it's experiencing my painting? So that's usually when I bring out my Royal Graphite pencil. It's a really thin, you know, you sharpen it pretty thin. And then I will create either lines or hash marks. This is where those patterns that are out in the world that you love, you know, you want to start thinking about them. Here it's a lot of water stuff, the way that birds interact, seabirds interact with the water. You know, they do these crazy like dives and then they jet back up. or it's the way that the cargo ships that are coming through our port look, and the way that they, you know, the tops of their smokestacks are and things like that. Like these are things that we're creating like as a visual kind of reference for ourselves. I have used all, you know, with the coffee, I've used all either browns or reds here. So I always like to come in with one, what I call, you know, like your one kick in the butt at the end. And usually it's a color that's like, doesn't seem like it should be there. It's like the thing, and it's going to be like pop, and it's going to punch you in the face. And I'm going to do this really like dusty pale blue here. It's a chalk, which like I said is a top layer thing. And you know, I kind of think about where is somebody's eye going to end, and how can we really give it like some little a taste of joy right at the end. This blue color tends to really be an interesting top or last mark for really red paintings. It's very muted, it's very light. And then I'll create a little spot.
Krista, is that still pretty wet?
It is still pretty wet.
Okay.
You know, I am totally not very good, and I will really push it, you know?
Yeah.
I'm honest about it, you know, like.
Well, it lays on top of it really well, it seems
It looks
like.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it might even in some weird way fix it a little bit. Maybe
Probably.
not in a way you can control, but
Yeah.
Not in a way that the makers would like me to be doing it. I mean, that's mixed media abstract art. It's like, how can I really push a material and make it look and act as weird as humanly possible?
Anybody else finding it really fun just to watch Kirista working?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Not that we don't want you to work yourself, but it is really fun to see these paintings kind of come together. Oh, you're going back on top with,
Right?
wow, more fluorescent red. You are bad.
You know, it always
I
seems
love it.
they can't get too upset about it, right? And often I also will put a gold pigment on top. You know, it's just this thing that's like, it has the viewer asking like, why was that decision made? Again, the goal is to have people sit with it as long as humanly possible. I actually am also going to work back on this one that's so much graphite and gesso. I did do a layer of yellow that came from one of the Neo Pastels, right? And I sprayed it and then let it dry. And now I'm going to kind of use the crayon to still make it look kind of crayon-y.
Interesting.
You know, it's an experiment. A lot of this is experiments also in like matte versus shiny.
There you go, Tashween. Good. I love it. While you're talking, everybody's still sending pictures of what. By the way, Jean, I like the last iteration of that. Very nice. Super.
I love how people tend to fall into the color zones that they feel really comfortable in. It's funny how we rework the same colors over and over again, right? Like I said, I hated yellow. I actually also have a distaste for purple, which everybody in the world knows about. But I am working through my distaste for purple, which is one of the reasons I kind of force myself to use it. I will often go in with water on top of the pastels, just kind of liquefy and activate the material a little bit better. I'm looking to like darken it up a little bit. This is also a great, like this particular piece right here is would be really good for spots.
Right.
I tend to, you know, I use little tiny cups, like mouthwash cups, and paint to make a, you know, half flow, half water, part paint, liquid material, and then so that you can then splatter it, right? You want it to be as thin as possible, but it's still working on the integrity of what you're working with, which is what that flow helps with, thankfully. And then, oh yeah, fluorescent red for the win, always. We'll let that dry out.
See,
And then
this is why you need different teachers. I'll be like, we're all going to tell you like different things. You know, everybody's going to tell you. We all have our things that we like. Everyone's is
Yeah.
different. This will teach you as well that like you've all been kind of well schooled in my color palette. I like it that we're moving out of that. Although, quite truthfully, I like all those color palettes. I particularly am like lusting after the coffee right now. It's a beautiful
The
color
coffee
palette.
is really, really fun.
Oh yeah, that turned out well, Kirista.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
look at the
nice.
little dots. Little
They're
red
tiny
dots. Not too
It's
much.
the way of like, they always kind of remind me of magic. Sorry, it's sideways, everyone, but that is the nature of things. And then this one is really dark. It's still drying, so it's really dark, but it's fun.
Ooh, I love that.
This is the yellow and that fluorescent red.
Oh yeah, that turned out well.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see the difference. We can pretty much see on the Zoom screen the color,
Yeah.
the colors, but
Can't
it
see all
is
folks
just
anymore.
the detail we can't really see as well until we get it on the WhatsApp thread. So it's nice to get
Yeah.
a close up.
That blue is amazing. I
Yeah.
love it.
Can I ask a question about the first one that you just posted, the second to the last one?
Yeah.
Coffee and red oxide, I think is what it is.
Yeah, it's the
I think what I'm seeing under there is maybe the gesso prep. When you put that on, you just brush it in any way, shape, or form, and it maybe creates like a texture underneath.
I'm kind of being oversensitive about it. I like it to be all the same texture, and I use this brush every single time. So I use an angle brush.
Okay.
This is my gesso brush, and I do like it to go the same direction for the first layer, and then I go the opposite direction for the second layer, kind of like you would if you were barbecuing. That seems to me to be like the best tooth.
Are you waiting for layers to dry between the
Yes.
directions?
So I'll do a large number of pieces, let them dry, come back in for a second layer. But I'm going to tell you with the clear gesso in comparison to like a white gesso on canvas, you got like a 10-minute drying period. Like,
oh, sweet.
Seriously, you work 4 pages. By the time you're on the 4th page, your first layer of your first page is already dry.
And is your angle brush just a regular painter's brush, or?
It is actually, it's actually technically a craft brush. It was, you know, it's bought in the art supplies department. It's just a larger size. It does, and it's thinner than you would have like a
painting
house
brush.
paint brush, right?
Yeah.
I tried foam, and for a long time, foam was what I used. I think that this works better. So foam tends to leave little lines where like the gesso like puddles. And I tend to be really controlling about my texture. I really want to control the texture mainly because as you see, I work in these like washes. I work in thin washes. And so I don't like my surface to start out with too much texture on top of it. Some people like to build up that texture though. So you can do that with your gesso. I just personally can't handle it. But you see the way that it, you know,
it's gorgeous. Yeah.
It handles the coffee really well. Some other natural things that you can use the same way you use coffee is, you know, beets. I don't know if anybody here likes beets or likes pickled beets, but the pickling juice from pickled beets can be very helpful. Or any kind of juice that you make from your beets. Obviously, turmeric is a great dyeing agent with, I went on a, you know, I had a phase there for a little while where I was really trying to figure out what is the relationship between natural things like that as it comes to doing art practice like this. So I'm always, like I said, a rule breaker, a big fan of trying something just to see. Abstract art is very emotional. We're documenting emotions that we don't have words for. We don't have kind of these descriptions for. And so it's always fun to like really see where that gets us. It does make my work hard to document because I tend to use lots of metallics and lots of fluorescents.
And you said you're not gonna do gold leaf this class or of the whole series?
No, we'll do gold leaf later. Essentially, kind of how the series will end up working is, we got 4 basics classes. In the 4th class, we start to learn how to put everything together. Gold leaf will come out in that class for sure. And then moving forward after that, what we're going to do is we're going to look at one different abstract painter each class and see what, we're going to have exercises that come from their work. And we're probably not even going to start with traditional abstract artists that people are used to seeing, like say Pollock, because I think people are familiar with that, but it's going to be really fun. I will get into the gold leafing again, trying to give you best use case scenario. I still break the rules with it. I don't lie, but we'll definitely get into some gold leafing.
Leslie, that looks good.
Oh, it's super
Coming
bright. I
along.
feel like I want to put a bunch of gray on it, but
Do it.
it's,
Put a bunch of gray on it now.
I know. I just, I
Maybe
wish I had my
charcoal.
watercolors.
Maybe charcoal, but don't you have any acrylic?
No,
or anything?
it's out in the studio. I'll do it after. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't some stuff in, I grabbed.
I will say
so.
this about gray, just a use scenario. Gray tends to work best if you put it down first.
Yeah. Yeah, because I
But-
don't like the white.
Nice, Kirista.
And it's so bright,
Look
Yeah.
at that.
But you know what? What's really useful about something like yours though? You can go through and individually look at different sections of it
Yeah.
and say, but I like the way, because there's a part that you kind of scribbled green over and it's in between a blue and like a lighter blue. And that ends up looking really nice. And
Yeah.
that would be a moment that I would think to myself, I need to keep that in my brain pan for future iterations, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go, Tashmi. Now you're starting to get some
Yeah, good
layers in there.
Yeah,
Ha.
I like it.
Carissa,
I have
Carissa,
another quick question. I have lots of plywood hanging around. Can you paint on that, and do you need to prep it?
You need to prep it. You can paint on it. I use plywood quite a bit. What I will say about that is, like it's going to take several layers of gesso to create a surface that is
Got it.
usable, but it's not impossible. It's a great learning process. Surface wise, I either work on paper or I work on these gessoed boards here, so they're wood panels, but I do like the pre-gessoed ones, mainly because this particular company, which is the Jack Richardson company, must do the chalk and the gesso thing that I talked about, because it feels very different than other gessoed boards, but it does a better job of holding the matte paint, which is something that I appreciate, but 90% of my work's done on paper. I just did it.
Marcel, when I first started painting, I had bought a house in Seattle. This was a million years ago. And when one could afford to buy a house in Seattle, and I had to fix it up, and I started painting because I painted like every wall of every room in this 4-bedroom house a different color. So I had all this house paint and all of these like pieces of wood, and that's what I started doing. I started by just dripping house paint on pieces of wood, and I'd look up and hours would be gone.
I bet.
Like hours.
Cy Twombly actually used a lot of house paint. They're having problems now with his pieces.
I bet.
But it's definitely, especially like in the process of learning something, like do what works and what you have access to.
Carissa, this last one you just did, or you just posted on the thread, is that gold leaf?
It is not. That is actually a heavy-bodied iridescent rich bronze. Gold
Fun.
leaf,
It's gorgeous.
the gold leaf
Yeah.
is quite a bit shinier. What I do like about this particular one, because I've gone through a lot of different bronzes trying to find the right bronze, is it goes on really smooth and it can look sometimes like somebody has put gold leaf on it, and it's a lot more affordable than gold leaf. Being the
Excellent.
nature of it being gold, right? It's amazing what a tiny little splotch of a metallic paint can do to pull a composition together. You can feel like you're going nowhere, and then it just,
Boom.
like somebody did something on purpose.
Oh my God, this is fun. This is relaxing. Probably not for you, but for us, it's like kind of relaxing. It's sort of fun.
Relaxing to me, actually. I got all these mini little compositions now, and you know, it's like, how do you, the decisions on how you make it come home are always a unique experience.
Would you recommend that they also maybe set up the way you've set up all these little mini things when they're working with you? So
I think it's dependent on how they personally want to work. I think if you have space to lie flat and you have, you know, I had larger paper, and so I was able to split it up this way. I will tell you, this is generally how I work. I have several pieces that are taped down like this. I like to work on 4 to 8 at a time. Again, it's that drying thing, right? You got to let things dry, and you got to work on them when they're drying. So I would encourage people, especially since sometimes the pieces of paper like this are a little cheaper than a sketchbook.
Yeah.
Or at least more accessible. What type of paper watercolor paper did they use for your watercolor classes?
I usually have them use 140 pound or 300 pound smooth, like, hot press. Is my suggestion, but actually, truthfully, everybody just uses whatever they have. So that's what I use. And by the way, guys, that reminds me, our schedule this week. So we have a shift in schedule in June, besides adding this class on, on Tuesday nights and afternoons, evenings. We've got Wednesday is figure drawing at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard, PST, so 9 p.m. EST. Thursday is 6:30 p.m. EST. That's going to become a drawing fundamentals class, beginning drawing. Although you can really bring, of course, anything you want to any of these classes and work on them. Friday is watercolor painting, and that is for the Europe crowd. So it's 8 a.m. at PST, 11 a.m. EST. 6 p.m. in London, and 5 p.m. in London, and 6 p.m. in Europe, and then 8:30 p.m. in India. And we have representatives from everywhere. And then Saturday, we've got another drawing fundamentals beginning drawing class that starts at 9:30 PST, 11:30 a.m. EST. And Sunday we've got 3 classes going. Actually, we've got a kids art class, which you need to register for separately because it's cheaper. It's like $10 a class, starting at 9 a.m. EST. We've got a PST. We've got a pastel landscapes class. This taught by Marie Sandgath. This month it's going to be beach scenes. Really gorgeous. That starts at 9 a.m. PST, noon EST. And then we've got my oil acrylic painting studio class, which is 3 hours, starts at 11:30 PST, 2:30 EST. And we're going to be starting figure drawing and painting. So although, once again, you can work on anything you can really bring anything you want to any class. Of course. So all of those, if you have an art pass, you can go into any class using your art pass. Marcel, I'm actually going to refund you the last 2 classes that are still owed on your last set. So you can just start logging. You can just start, you know what I mean? Logging in. I just think it's easier than trying to like go back and forth. You know what I mean? Go back and forth.
Yeah. Do you need to refund me did I pay for this one?
You did.
Oh,
So you're
see.
totally good. So now just now you can just use the new pass, and I'm going to send you the money back on the old pass that no longer works.
Okay,
So,
got it.
all right. Does that work?
Sure.
I love to watch the tape come off.
That's my
It's the
favorite part.
best part.
It is. I
I
don't know
will
what
say-
it is. I love it.
It's
just
because
that,
it turns it into, because it frames it.
that sharp line.
Right?
Yeah,
I
look
will
at
say-
this. Oh, yum.
That I don't typically use blue tape. I use
Yeah.
the purple painter's tape.
Okay.
It's more delicate for paper. But this was what was in the studio and accessible, and see, it rips my paper a little bit. It's not a big deal. I like to look at them individually when they become their own little paintings and kind of see, you know, I usually will do this and then do one last layer of
So-
just like
So is this one large piece of paper? Not
one
not
large
a
piece of
little
paper,
Oh,
yeah.
cool.
So you could get like an 18 by, what is it, like 18 by 24 inches? Yeah. So if you have the room and the setup, it might
Right.
be a fun way to set things up.
Mhm.
You don't have to do it
You
that
can
way.
you can even do it in smaller pieces of paper too. This is how I work when I work at home, because I like to work.
And you
off
could
the table.
collage it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely, you know, we will go through lots of different types of abstract collage. And keep all your scraps, all the pieces that you don't like, because I can guarantee they'll come back to be beneficial at another time.
Yeah.
This one down here in the corner ended up really nicely, surprisingly, which you guys can't really see. Yeah, this one down here in the corner is really
Yeah.
nice, dark, moody, which is interesting because I don't typically do really dark paintings, but today I did. It's because it's so bright, it makes me cranky, right?
It's true. There's nothing like Oregonians to get pissed off when it's
Oh my
like,
God, I
hot
hate the heat.
outside.
I've been sitting in the dark all day. I'm like,
we're
don't
just
turn
like,
the lamp
"Don't,
on.
look, what is that golden ball in the sky? It sucks."
We got sunburned yesterday, but I mean, and that's fine. That's pretty Oregonian, but we've been running a kiln all weekend, so it's,
Oh,
you know, residual warmth for
And
sure.
this is like, this is sort of my current addiction here. Oh boy, you can't really tell easy. This is Audrey. This is one of Audrey's, Krista's Partners cups. What I really love about them
Beautiful.
is if you can really, here, I'm going to take a picture of it so you can really see it. I own like many. I'm looking at like 5 more right now. It's
Doing a
insane.
Special collab release for June. But there will only be 10 of them.
Okay.
I got kind of obsessed with pottery again, watching the Great Pottery Throwdown on HBO or Netflix. I forget which one. And it was like, oh, because I did that a long time ago, 20,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
20 plus years ago.
I could see you being very good with that because you still work with that way. You work with your hands.
Yeah.
In the,
Well, and I
your
did,
work with
I
one
was
of the more
thinking of the last
tactile.
time I really did abstract work
Oof.
was when I did stained glass and metal smithing. You know,
Kirista,
that
this
was
is
30 years
beautiful.
ago.
Hey, Krista, look at the cup that I just posted that Audrey did is
Yeah,
exactly the
yeah.
colors that you have just sent us.
It happens more often than you know.
Oh,
I
what a
bet.
beautiful mug.
Isn't that beautiful?
Our,
That handle.
Ugh.
oh, yeah, she is very talented and very technical.
Mm-hmm. Don't start unless you're willing to make it a habit, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, you can't have just one.
No.
Okay.
This is
Regret-
looking great. All
They
right.
look really great. Yeah.
They look wonderful.
Everything looks really good. Now that we got the tape off, it's very interesting. Don't forget, you're paying attention to patterns and colorscapes
Mhm.
in between, starting to create your visual references.
Hey,
You
Chris,
have any last- Huh?
what was this picture that you just posted? What was the blue turquoisey paint along the edge?
It's a muted green, heavy body Liquitex.
Muted green,
It's
heavy body.
Definitely, because it's a phthalo green, it falls into that turquoise family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so next week, what is our subject? Design?
Next week is design. We're going to be doing some technical exercises. Working our math parts of our brain.
Oh. And everybody just needs to have whatever they can get.
I
Plus
would
this.
have some sort of paint, watercolor or acrylic, and I would have graphite.
Okay,
Okay.
and then the surface. Do you want them to have clear gesso if they can get their hands on it?
They can prep their stuff with clear gesso. That's always best, but it won't be necessary next week.
Okay, great.
So next week, we're going to be really working with fundamental design exercises that will play out later in our compositions.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions? What do you think? Are you stoked?
I'm stoked. Yeah, it's a great class. It's really great. It flew by.
Rebecca's like, I've been waiting for this to be like every time. Rebecca's been in my class for like a year and a half. And every time I'm like, I don't do abstract work. You're just gonna have to wait until I get somebody. I did good, right, Rebecca? I got you the right one. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording here. Does anybody want to hold up what they're working on just for the last bit of the recording? Just to show something?
Oh,
Hold it up.
well, I think I sent it already.
Yeah.
Hold up, hold
I
it up.
can't see
I know.
myself.
Just hold it up on the thing. Let's see. Marcel took a lot of notes. Oh, Jesus, that's great.
Love it.
Wonderful. Great work, everybody. Edith, I want to tell you, there's something about the way you laid down those colors. It's very beautiful, and it reminds me of Odilon Redon. That's
Thank
a
you.
compliment.
What
That's
a
a big
compliment.
old. That's a big old compliment.
I know. Thank you.
All right, Kirista, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody,
Krista.
and we will see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.